What if I told you the Bible talks about a time when not only the earth shakes, but heaven shakes too? There's a kingdom that cannot be shaken. We're going to talk about the forgotten high priest operating in the unseen realm, cosmic shaking of heaven and earth, Sinai versus Zion, the consuming fire of God, and what it actually means to live anchored in an unshakable kingdom in unstable times. Have you ever felt like the ground underneath everything is moving? Not literally, but culturally, politically, and spiritually. Like something is shifting under the surface of the world and nobody quite knows what's coming next. One day it's economic instability. The next day it's AI replacing jobs, right? So then wars rumbling overseas. Oh my gosh, like what happened yesterday? Then moral confusion, so thick you could cut it with a knife. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, most people are just trying to keep their footing. Okay. But what if I told you the Bible talks about a time when not only the earth shakes, but heaven shakes too? I mean, and I'm not talking metaphorically, cosmically. Today we're stepping into the book of Hebrews. And I need you to understand something up front. That Hebrews is not soft devotional material. It's not a pastel coffee mug Christianity. It's fire, it's thunder, it's heavy, it's heavenly temples. Sorry. It's angels in assembly and a high priest operating in another dimension. And it ends with the warning that God is a consuming fire and everything that can be shaken will be shaken. That's not Hallmark Channel theology, guys. That's supernatural kingdom reality. And here's the part that hits hardest. In the middle of all that shaking, there's a kingdom that cannot be shaken. So tonight, we're going to talk about the forgotten high priest operating in the unseen realm. This is huge. The cosmic shaking of heaven and earth, Sinai versus Zion, the consuming fire of God, and what it actually means to live anchored in an unshakable kingdom in unstable times. As usual, this isn't about fear. It's about footing. And if you've ever felt like the world is wobbling, this episode is for you. If you've ever wondered whether the spiritual realm is more active than we realize, this episode is for you. And if you're trying to live steady in strange times, you're in the right place. Because welcome to Broadcasting Seeds. If you haven't already, take a second to like, follow, share, and leave a review. That's how the show grows. That's how this conversation reaches more people who are quietly asking the same questions that you are. So, all right, let's step into Hebrews. Section 1, the forgotten high priest. Now, let me ask you something. When was the last time you heard someone talk about Jesus as a functioning high priest? Not as savior, not as a teacher, not as a miracle worker, as high priest. Exactly. We don't talk about that much anymore. And yet Hebrews puts it front and center. Here's the claim Hebrews makes, and it's wild if you actually sit with it, okay? Jesus didn't just die, rise, and disappear into the clouds. It's not what happened. He ascended into a real functioning heavenly sanctuary and is actively operating there right now. Now, people have contentious theories about whether that's true, whether it's the Satan's little season. There's all kinds of theories. All right. But for this conversation, he's operating there right now. Hebrews says the earthly temple in Jerusalem was never the main stage. It was a copy, a shadow, a rehearsal space. The real temple isn't in Israel at all. It's in heaven. Read Hebrews 8 slowly sometime. Jesus is a minister in the sanctuary and the true tent that the Lord set up, not man. That's not symbolic language, folks. Not poetic fluff. Heavenly structure, heavenly throne, heavenly priesthood. Now think about that in practical terms. Ancient Israel had one day a year where the high priest entered the Holy of Holies, the Day of Atonement, blood sacrifice. You had fear, silence, bells tied to his robes in case he dropped dead in the presence of God. That was terrifying. But Hebrews, it flips that. It says Jesus entered once and for all, not into a man-made room behind a veil, but into the actual presence of God. And here's the part most people miss. He didn't go in to visit. He went in to serve. That means there's ongoing intercession happening beyond what your eyes can see. You ever feel like your prayers hit the ceiling? Hebrews says they don't, because there is a high priest advocating for you in a dimension layered over this one. That's not that's not soft theology, folks. That's cosmic governance. And Hebrews ties this priesthood to one of the strangest figures in the Bible, Melchizedek. Melchizedek. Genesis 14, a king and priest who appears out of nowhere, no genealogy, no origin story, no death record. Hebrews says Jesus belongs to that order, an eternal priesthood, no beginning, no end. If you're into the strange and the mysterious, this should get your attention, because Hebrews is basically saying the spiritual realm is not passive. It's structured. It's organized. It has a hierarchy and it has function. And Christ is seated at the center of it. Now let me connect this to you. If Jesus is functioning as high priest in the true sanctuary, that means your security is not anchored in earthly systems at all. Not governments, not markets, not institutions, not even church buildings, which we've talked about in the past here. Your anchor is tied to something operating in another realm entirely, and that changes how you handle chaos. And when the ground feels unstable, you remember something. The throne room isn't shaking. We'll talk about shaking next. But before we get there, you need this foundation. You're not alone in the unseen. There is an active priesthood operating in your favor. That's not fantasy. That's Hebrews. And most believers have completely forgotten that. Section 2, the cosmic shaking. All right. Now that we've established something huge, that Christ is functioning in a real heavenly sanctuary, we have to deal with the part of Hebrews that makes most modern Christians, frankly, a little uncomfortable. The shaking. Hebrews 12 says this, "Yet once more I will shake not only the earth, but also the heavens." Let that sit for a second. Not just earthquakes, not just political turmoil, heavens, plural. The writer is quoting the prophet Haggai. 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 But he's not applying it forward. Future tense, not history, not Babylon, not Rome, a coming shaking. And here's where we need to slow down, because this is where people either drift into panic or drift into denial. Hebrews doesn't say everything is going to wobble randomly. It says the shaking has purpose. So that's the thing that cannot be shaken, so that the things that cannot be shaken may remain. That changes everything. This isn't chaos for chaos' sake. It's filtration. It's refinement, exposure, right? Imagine a massive industrial sifter. You pour a mixture in, it shakes violently, and everything unstable falls away. That's what solid remains. That's the imagery, okay? And if you're honest, doesn't it feel like we're living through tremors right now like that? Cultural structures that looked permanent 20 years ago, straight cracking. Moral assumptions are fracturing. Institutions people trusted without question are now questioned daily. It feels like instability. Hebrews says it's revelation, because shaking reveals what you built your life on. Okay. You ever see what happens during an actual earthquake? Have you? The weak structures don't negotiate. They freaking collapse. And well-built ones bend and hold. That's not punishment. That's just physics. And spiritually, it's similar. Hebrews is telling believers who were under pressure, I mean, real pressure, don't retreat to something smaller just because it feels safer. Don't run back to Sinai because Zion feels invisible. The temptation for those early believers was to go back to the old covenant temple system, visible and tangible and familiar. But Hebrews says that system isn't, that system itself was just temporary, and it was about to be shaken. If this was written before 70 AD, then within a few years, Jerusalem would literally fall and the temple would be destroyed. Talk about shaking. Everything they thought was permanent, gone. But the kingdom of Christ, freaking untouched. That's the distinction. The kingdom isn't the same thing as earthly religious structure. Let that sink in. Let it sink in. Because this is where we get tripped up. When systems shake, people assume God is losing. Hebrews actually says the opposite. Shaking removes what was never eternal in the first place. It's uncomfortable, folks. It's unsettling, but it's not out of control. And here's the personal question. When pressure hits your life, financial stress, health scares, betrayal, uncertainty, what shakes loose? Fear? Bitterness? Desperation? Or does something deeper actually hold? That's not condemnation. That's diagnostic, because Hebrews isn't trying to scare you. It's trying to anchor you. A kingdom that cannot be shaken implies everything else can. And if we're honest, that's exactly what we're seeing. Section 3, Sinai versus Zion. Two mountains, two realities. Let's paint the picture. One mountain is covered in smoke. Lightning splits the sky. Thunder cracks so violently that people beg for it to stop. There's a trumpet blast that grows louder and louder until it feels like your bones are vibrating. The ground trembles. There's fire at the summit and a boundary line at the base that says if you cross this, frankly, you die. That's Mount Sinai. That's Exodus 19. That's the giving of the law. It was terrifying, and it was supposed to be. God wasn't trying to be dramatic for no reason. Sinai established something. Holiness is not casual. But then Hebrews does something brilliant. It says, you have not come to that mountain. Let that sink in. You have not come to that mountain. Maybe you have not come to a mountain that may be touched and that burned with fire. Instead, Hebrews says, you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to innumerable angels in festal gathering. Festal gathering. Not trembling, not terror, celebration. Same God, different access. This is where people misunderstand the new covenant. They think grace means God got softer. Hebrews doesn't say that. It says the location changed. The approach changed. Sinai was distance. Zion is invitation. Sinai said, stay back. Zion says, come forward. But where's the supernatural part most people skip over? But here's the supernatural part most people skip over. Zion in Hebrews isn't talking about earthly Jerusalem. It's talking about heavenly geography. The heavenly Jerusalem. The writer is describing a populated spiritual reality, angels in assembly, the spirits of the righteous made perfect, God as judge of all, Jesus as mediator, this layered cosmology. That's what this is. Layered cosmology, not metaphor. The early church understood this better than we do today. Bottom line, they believed worship wasn't just songs in a room, and they believed they were participating in something happening in another realm. Then, when they gathered, they were aligning with heavenly Zion. Now pause. If that's true, church isn't a building. We've talked about this the last 2 episodes, and it's not performance. It's participation. And that matters for you personally, because a lot of believers still live in Sinai emotionally. They approach God like he's lightning waiting to strike. Constant anxiety, constant fear. This is the God that people are given. Constant sense of not enough. Hebrews says you're standing on a different mountain now, folks. But it also gives a warning. Just because you're at Zion doesn't mean casual rebellion is safe. Same God, remember, consuming fire. The difference is covenant, not character. So here's the question. Are you living like someone standing at Sinai or someone standing at Zion? Are you shrinking back? Or are you stepping forward boldly? Hebrews says we approach with confidence because the high priest we just talked about, Jesus, that's why section 1 matters. Because access without a priest would still be terrifying. But access with a mediator, Jesus, that's security, folks. And this is where the shaking connects. If you're anchored to Sinai systems, when they fall, you panic. If you're anchored to Zion, when systems fall, you stay steady because your mountain isn't geographic, it's eternal. Section 4, our God is a consuming fire. Now we get to the line that makes people sit up straight or shift uncomfortably in their seat, okay? Hebrews ends this whole mountain comparison, this shaking imagery, this heavenly assembly talk with one final statement. Our God is a consuming fire. Not was, is. That's pulled straight from Deuteronomy. Same God of Sinai, same God of Zion, consuming fire. Now here's where we have to slow down, because this is where people get weird, straight up weird. Some hear fire and think rage. Some hear fire and they think about judgment only. Some hear fire and immediately jump to end times panic. But fire in scripture is more layered than that, and it always has been. Fire destroys, yes, of course, but fire also purifies and it refines. It reveals what something actually is. You ever see raw gold pulled from the ground, like a gold nugget? It's not really shiny. It's mixed with everything else, so there's like stone and some other elements that are in there as well. But when gold goes into the fire, all the impurities rise to the surface. The gold's not destroyed, it's clarified. Now apply that to shaking. If everything that can be shaken will be shaken, then everything that can't survive the fire won't. Not because God is insecure, but because truth doesn't need props. Hebrews is telling believers in a hostile environment, don't treat grace like God got weak. Grace gave you access, and fire still reveals what's real. Here's the personal part. When pressure hits your life, what burns up? Do you lose your identity? And this is a freaking problem right now. Do you collapse when approval disappears? Do you crumble when comfort is stripped away? Or does something deeper in you remain? The consuming fire of God is not about annihilating you. It's about removing what was never you. Bro, that's heavy. In my opinion, that's heavy. But it's freeing, because a lot of what we build our identity on is not eternal. Your career, your status, your trends, platforms, even religious performance, right? Fire exposes whether your faith is rooted in Christ or in comfort. And let me say something clearly. The fire of God is not random. It's covenantal. It operates within relationship, alignment. If you are anchored to the high priest we talked about earlier, the fire refines you, not rejects you. But if someone builds their entire life on systems that oppose God's kingdom, when shaking and fire come, those systems, they just don't survive. That's not conspiracy talk. That's Hebrews, folks. And here's where this intersects with times we live in right now. We see exposure happening constantly. Leaders exposed, institutions exposed, hidden things coming to light. Hebrews says, don't be shocked by that, because shaking reveals, fire clarifies. The real question isn't why is this happening? The real question is what in me can't survive fire? Because the kingdom that cannot be shaken is also the kingdom that cannot be burned away. And that leads us to the final section. If there's an unshakable kingdom, what does it actually look like to live anchored in it? Section 5, living inside the unshakable kingdom. All right. We've talked about the high priest operating in the unseen. We've talked about cosmic shaking. We've talked about the two mountains, consuming fire we've touched on. Now here's where it gets personal. Because it's one thing to understand theology, guys. It's another thing to live steady when the world feels like it's tilting. Hebrews says, therefore, let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. You hear that? Receiving. Present tense. Not waiting for it, not hoping for it, receiving it now. So what does that actually look like? First, it means your identity isn't tied to unstable systems. If your sense of worth rises and falls with headlines, elections, markets, social approval, church trends, or algorithms, you are going to feel constant tremors. I mean, this is so simple, guys. The unshakable kingdom doesn't move with opinion cycles. It doesn't fluctuate with media narratives. It doesn't panic. It doesn't get scrambled up. It endures. And if you belong to it, your footing changes. Second, it means your worship shifts. Hebrews says we offer acceptable worship with reverence and awe. That's not fear-driven religion. That's grounded alignment. Worship, folks, isn't hype. It's orientation. It's saying, I know where the throne is, and it's not here. That one realization stabilizes you more than you could ever think or imagine. Because when you know where the throne actually is, you stop overreacting to temporary thrones. Third, it changes how you handle pressure. Because if shaking is filtration, right? The shaking, then pressure becomes clarifying instead of paralyzing. When something in your life collapses, instead of immediately assuming defeat, I want you to ask, was that eternal? Or was it just scaffolding? There's a difference. Sometimes God lets scaffolding fall so the structure can stand. And the unshakable kingdom doesn't require perfect circumstances. It requires rootedness. Here's the practical part. Living inside the unshakable kingdom means you don't mirror panic culture, which is just rampant, right? You don't chase every conspiracy rabbit hole without discernment. You don't surrender to fear narratives. This is a big one. And you don't idolize political saviors. You don't retreat into spiritual apathy. You stay alert, but you stay anchored. That's different because you can be awake without being frantic. I mean, come on. You can see shaking without assuming doom, right? You can recognize fire without assuming abandonment. Seriously. Hebrews was written to believers under pressure who were tempted to shrink back. And the writer says something sharp. We are not those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. That's courage language. Not loud, not arrogant, steady. And that's what this episode is really about. It's not about hype or sensationalism or footing. It's about footing. Because if everything that can be shaken will be shaken, the only sane move is to anchor yourself so anchor yourself to what can't be shaken. And Hebrews says that kingdom isn't coming someday. It says it's here. Invisible to some, unmovable nonetheless, right? All right. So let's bring this home. Hebrews doesn't give us a soft landing like most of this Bible. It gives us clarity. There is a high priest operating in real heavenly sanctuary right now. His name is Jesus. There is a shaking that removes what was never permanent. There are two mountains, and you're standing on one of them, whether you realize it or not. Okay? There is a consuming fire that reveals what's real, and there is a kingdom that cannot be shaken. That's not escapism. That's footing. We live in strange times. Systems wobble, narratives collide. Things that looked solid 10 years ago suddenly are very fragile right now. But Hebrews isn't written to people in comfort. It's written to people under pressure. And the message surely isn't panic. It's perseverance, and it's alignment. It's gratitude for a kingdom that you already belong to, hopefully. So here's the question I want to leave you with tonight. What if your life is built on something shakable? And what is anchored is something eternal? That's not condemnation, that's invitation. Because if the shaking reveals your foundation, better to examine it now than during the tremor. If this episode helped you see Hebrews in a different light, take a second to like, follow, share, and leave a review. That's how Broadcasting Seeds grows. That's how this conversation reaches the person quietly listening at 2 a.m., wondering if everything is falling apart. Share this with someone who feels like the world is wobbling. Remind them there is a kingdom that is not wobbling. This is Bennett Tanton. This is Broadcasting Seeds. Stay awake, stay steady, and remember, if you're anchored to the unshakable kingdom, you don't have to fear the shaking. Have a good day.
The sky feels thinner. The ground won't stay still. Headlines screaming like prophecy fulfilled. Walls we trusted crack at the seams. Kings and kingdoms fall like dreams. You can feel it coming like thunder underground. Something's breaking, but something won't bow down. They said build it higher. They said trust the flame. But fire don't destroy the gold, it only shows its name. Let it shake, let it fall, let the mountains crumble into dust. There's a throne over all, and it's never turning into rust. When the earth gives way and the heavens roar, I'll make it to what remains unshaken. If it can't survive you, let it go. I don't want foundations built on sand and show. Let it shake, let it fall, let the stars burn out if they must. There's a throne over all, and it doesn't bend to dust. When the earth gives way and the heavens roar, I'm standing where I stand, unshaken, unshaken, unshaken.